for those of you who don't know, I'm trying to build a RaceFlight rig, and I'm doing this because people told me that my last setup wasn't quite right and that I didn't do a couple of things right. So I was like, all right, I'll do it again. So I decided not to just do the RaceFlight bolt and revolt together. I was going to do the RaceFlight bolt, revolt, brand new frame, brand new motors, everything brand new VTX, everything. Not that that matters, but all I'm saying is everything's new, fresh, so it should be good. Well, I wanted to take it a step further. I want to take it a step further by not only building it myself, but have it overseen by someone who's an expert with RaceFlight, someone who really knows what they're doing. And I thought to myself, who could that person be that's close to me? And I realized something. I was like, well, let's go to the champ's house and have him check out my RaceFlight build and have him set it up and do all of that stuff, because he would know better than anyone else. Those of you that don't know who Alex Vanover is, he is the 2017 national champion, multi-GP champion. So I'm at his house. This is the rig. You guys are going to get to see it fly. As you can see, there's a RaceFlight stack on there. Everything's done stellar as far as I'm concerned. But we're just going to see what Alex has to say about it.
I'm the RaceFlight expert, apparently. It's all on me if it doesn't work.
He's the expert today. We're going to find out if this actually works. So we're going to let you guys in on just a little bit of this, and we'll get cut right back to you in a second, which is basically starting up power and ground, starting up your receiver, and plugging in the revolt to the bolt. So we're actually going to put power to it. And, oh yeah, I forgot, I did solder on the caps to the spots where they belong. I didn't even cut corners there either.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do right now, and we're going to put that on video as we do. So,
would you like to do the honors, sir?
Actually, no, because I probably don't even have a charge pack. Now I'm thinking about it.
Look at this guy. Now, if he had normal XT, good old XT60 connectors, then he wouldn't have to worry about that, because I have charged packs right here. But we'll let the poor man have his Deans.
I like my Deans, and I do have a charge pack, so kiss my butt.
All right, do you want me to hold it, or you want me to plug it in?
No, I want you to sit it down and plug it in.
But you can hold the camera, so they can see it.
Here
So we're gonna do a little. I do this actually with all my builds. Fun fact: I do a little prayer to the quad gods, Omni VOR. So I've inspected this. I've seen it. I don't think anything's gonna happen. And so here we go.
Make sure the polarity's correct. Oh, what? I saw something spark.
Can I get? These are Deans. How do you plug these things in?
Wow.
Okay, I think the spark goes from right here because of Deans. I've known this from the RC airplane days. If you just touch them, because it's a really strong connection here, it goes. But anyhow, I'm gonna just in case.
Everything powered up.
Everything's
looks
powered
good.
up.
Lights are on.
Revolt's on. It's hard to see underneath because the board's flipped inverted, but it is.
And
it is on.
wire's going across there, so it is on.
Yep, no sparky sparks.
All right, so we don't have to have it plugged in to
plug
it into the.
Nope,
computer,
this is
right?
nothing though. We will, in part of the configurator, have to plug it in, but if we want, we'll walk you guys through that, or at least I will, because it's all on me when this thing. The fun fact is, when this works and he converts over, maybe not converts, but he enjoys it, I will get to say I was right, which I'm never really right in our group. I'm always wrong about everything, so if there's one thing I can be right about, I will take that. So let's get to it.
I'll work with that. I'll work.
Okay, so 324. This is what you can get as of whenever this video is probably out on the website. So I got my cable here. So to do the first thing, you guys update the firmware. So we're just going to plug the revolt in. It plugs into the computer. Computer recognizes it. So when you do this originally, it's going to say loading failed, yada yada yada. You need the latest firmware. So you go to update firmware. And you're going to want to, when you go to RaceFlight's website, you're going to want to download the actual firmware file. So these are all beta firmware, so I'm going to actually go to the current firmware on the website. And again, depending on when you watch this video, this will change. Right now it's 324. We're going to click open. It's going to say prepare for flashing. And we're just going to give it a second here. Revolt's all plugged in and everything like that. I'm not shorting any pins out, okay? And now it's flashing. So it takes about 2 minutes to do this, and that's pretty much all about that. It's nice. You don't have to short any boot pins or anything like that. No button, no soldering, nothing. You literally just plug it into the computer and it does its magic. So that works also in the future if you a new RaceFlight firmware comes out. You don't have to upgrade the board or anything like that. Even the version 1 boards still work with this firmware. Basically, you just have to update the firmware, and in the GUI, there's no shorting pins or anything like that. You literally click Update Firmware. It even lets you know when there's a new firmware update, and you just go for it. So, I actually want to see if anyone in the comments knows what these numbers mean. Okay, so firmware has been successfully flashed on here. It's still connected to the quad. You don't need to unplug it or anything. You're just going to press OK. And then you're going to give it a second. It's going to load, and then this is where we get to do the RaceFlight setup. This is, in my opinion, what makes RaceFlight really awesome. So it looks like your board's never been set up.
Didn't bind either yet. So
nope. Have you not? Okay. So have you not bound the receiver? No. Okay. So we'll do that here in a moment. No need to rush. We're gonna do. So you're gonna choose your receiver. So if you run Crossfire or Futaba, you're going to select other receiver. But if you're running Tyrannus or Spectrum, you're going to want to select it. It doesn't matter which Spectrum or Tyrannus receiver. Just select one of the two. Okay. And then, let's see, we're going to click that. What that's doing is it's going to help you figure out which UART that you soldered it to on here. And that's kind of what it's doing right now, is it's doing its little thing. Oops, save timeout. Let's try that again. I might have to restart the configurator. RaceFlight. Okay, let's just restart it. Okay. Just to be safe.
Now, is there supposed to be a light on the receiver? Does it power the receiver up?
I'm not sure about the Tyrannus ones.
Okay.
The Crossfire ones, I know it does. Okay. So I would imagine so. There we go.
There we go.
Sometimes you just got, if you leave the configurator running, and I haven't had this on Mac, on Windows computers, but on Macs, on Betaflight and RaceFlight it does this, but just know that if you're having issues. And then if you're not sure how to connect the receiver up, just click on this. It'll connect you to the internet. Watch the video on how to do it. Choose your VTX. We're going to be running Smart Audio, Unify. So we're going to do the Unify, and then we soldered it to the TX UART3 port. And for you guys, he has it actually cleanly soldered underneath, but it's right where the tip of my fingernail is there. Now, we're going to go in there and double check this later on, but just click Next for now. At least now the flight controller knows, and it'll even show you how to wire up the VTX. Do you want to run reverse props? We're racers, and of course we want to run reverse props. And that's going to tell the ESC directions. And now you're going to go through the steps 1 through 6. So the first step, and you're going to want a little bit of space to do this, is we're going to set up the flight controller. Now, depending on how you mount the board, upside down, sideways, it does not matter. This is what you're going to want to do. So if you're using racing or freestyle, we're going to be racing. It doesn't really matter what you select. If you select freestyle, it's going to put some more expo into it, help you smoothen out your sticks. But for racing, it still uses expo, just not the same type. And this is how it sets the default PID settings. So we're on a 4 to 5 inch quad, so we're going to click that. Okay, so this doesn't have to be perfectly flat, but you know what, just for the sake of this, let's put it over there. Okay, so you're going to want to place the quad perfectly flat, and this is really crucial for later on. So it's flat, so we're going to click Next. And then you're going to place the quad on its nose, and I have a helper here, so this is even easier. So he's going to hold it like this. If you're by yourself, just hold it with one hand and then click Next. And it's going to hold it there for a second, and this is figuring out the board orientation. And so now you can set it back level. So it doesn't matter how you mount this board, sideways and whatever.
And this is upside down.
Yep, and it's upside down, and I like that because it's nice and clean.
Yes.
So anyhow, detect receiver, this is where we're going to want it bound. So I don't know if this one powers the receiver on. It doesn't maybe look like it. So we're going to definitely want a battery for this. And so I'm just going to set the camera down. He's going to get his Tyrannus into bind mode, which is probably super complicated because it's a Tyrannus.
We want to make sure it's in D16 mode, which it is. And I only need 8 channels, so that's what I'm doing. It does lower the milliseconds. And I'm going to go to bind. You press enter, and you'll hear the noise. So at that point, now I'm going to take a tool, and I'm going to have Alex hold it down or plug it in while I hold down the bind button, which will be much easier, I think.
And he's going to let me know whenever he is ready. And I don't want to short this quad out, so I got to make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, so we're going to bind this receiver. Turns out it was an error in the wiring. So this is not my build, so I'm not going to blame this on myself. So we're going to go through how to bind this again. So the first thing is you're going to want to plug in the revolt. It supplies power to the receiver, and then Cedric will talk about what he's actually doing to get it to bind, because some people don't know.
We kind of did that already.
Oh, okay. He basically is going to model setup, and he goes to bind. It'll make this weird noise.
So we really need to unplug it and then plug it back in.
Do you have to? Oh yeah, it's true. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to.
Okay, ready?
Okay. Now you can plug it back up, and it has it.
Look at that, guys. FR Sky for the win. Okay, so we set up the flight controller. The next thing we're going to do is, with the radio plugged in, which is obnoxiously loud for some reason.
That's the way I like mine.
Keeps talking. We're going to do automatically detect receiver. And so you basically want to make sure your radio is bound and everything. It says put it 10 feet away. It doesn't really matter, honestly. But you know what? We're going to go by the instructions just because, got to do it.
We're at least going to put it a little bit further away.
Okay, so it's bound. Okay, so once you have your flight controller set up, we had a little bit of wiring issues, so we're going to do this again. It's all fixed now. So we're going to go to detect receiver. You want to make sure it's bound and your radio's turned on, and your radio is also 10 feet away roughly. You're going to click that. You're going to click next. It's going to scan. It's going to figure out which UART your signal is soldered to, and bam, auto detection succeeded. So the next thing you want to do is you want to grab your radio. And this is setup radio. This is where you're going to adjust your travel inputs. So we're going to click next, and you're going to move the sticks in clockwise circles, trying to make sure together. They don't have to be perfectly exact, but you're trying to hit all of the endpoints like that, so you make sure you get a full precise. And you just do it. You just do it a few times, yeah. And so you just neutralize it all. Okay. We're going to click next. It's going to say move throttle to the top. So when it moves the throttle to the top, it'll say now push yaw to the right. Okay, now push the right stick to the top, and then push roll stick to the right. And that just figured out the whole reversing. Now you want to figure out which your arm switch is, and the Tyrannus you have to go and enable the actual switch already. So he's going to figure out. So he wants it in the disarm position right now. So he may not even have to touch anything. And now he's going to want to arm it. So he's going to click the switch, and we're going to click next, and it's going to figure out which switch was done on the radio. And you can verify this because if you look right here, when he moves the switch, it actually adjusts everything, which is pretty cool. So, sweet. So next thing we get to do now, this is where the fun gets to happen because we're going to be putting power to this baby. We're going to update the ESCs. RaceFlight, when you download the firmware, actually has the ESC protocol built in. Whether you're running a RaceFlight ESC or a non-RaceFlight ESC, it's going to put RaceFlight BLHeli firmware on there, which is pretty sweet. So I have removed props and connect to the battery. You have to check this off. So we have our props off. We're going to connect the battery. It sparks. Deans are strong though. Okay, so you wait for all the ESC tones to be done. We're going to click next now. Now here's the fun part. So it's going to take about a minute, and it's just updating the ESCs with the correct firmware. And this firmware changes based on the firmware you're running. So every time you update, you want to go through these steps again. It is a little bit of a pain. At the same time, though, it's beneficial because you know you're not missing anything by doing this. It's like a safety check.
Yeah. Nice.
So just give it a moment. And that's how you know you have the right tones.
That's the tone I want.
Yep. Wait for all tones to be finished, then click OK. And this is going to be setting up this is writing the firmware now for turtle mode.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, RaceFlight. But so wait till all tones are finished. And then this is just a bunch of data that does not matter. Okay. It probably does matter.
It matters, just not to us, right?
Not to us. We don't care. Okay, so we're going to unplug the battery now. And we're going to go to the next step, which is calibrate the motors. So I've removed the props and disconnected the battery. We're going to click next. And so you want to keep the quad still, plug in the battery, and wait till all the ESC tones are finished, and then press OK. So he's going to plug it in. You want to make sure that all of these tones are in sync with each other. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get it, usually no more than 2 or 3 tries, but in this case it did it first try. If you're having issues in the air where the quad feels like it's getting some oscillations, it's probably because one of your motors wasn't calibrated equally to the others, and so it's a little bit uneven. This is a tip for both RaceFlight and Betaflight and KISS. Okay, click done, and so we're going to leave the battery plugged in for the next step. This is one of the coolest features. Fix motor direction. I have removed the props and connected the battery. We're going to click next, and it's going to actually, without anyone touching anything, this is where you're going to want to check your motor direction. Do it now before later. So this one is spinning clockwise. This is counterclockwise.
This one's correct.
Okay, so counterclockwise, 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 clockwise. And the next thing it's going to do is it's going to figure out which motor, like your motor layout and whatnot. So front left motor, this is spinning the wrong way, but we're just going to click it. Okay, this is spinning the wrong way, and it's the front right motor. So we're going to click front right. This is the back right motor, and it is spinning the right way. And then it's not even going to do the fourth motor because it's got 3 of the 4 at that point. So you can literally solder motor 1 to anything on here, no matter what ESC it is, and it'll work. So wait till all the tones are finished. So we knew that every motor was wrong except this back one right here, okay? So you're going to want to click every other one.
Not that one.
Not this one? You're right.
That one.
Look at me. New mistake. So it's going to process this. It's basically writing the firmware. You don't have to do any separate BL heli or anything like that. Okay. So left, right, right. Are all motors spinning in the right direction? You can even verify it on the screen. We're going to click yes. Okay. Now if he grabs his radio, he can actually arm the quad right now just to test it. It's going to do double arm. There we go. So everything's working. Sounds pretty clean to me. Now, if you're getting some vibrations, which he isn't, which is good, you're going to want to mess with the filtering, which is a whole nother thing, which stock should work okay, but just keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and unplug the battery, and we're going to go into the configuration. So we're on the setup screen right now. We'll talk about the rest of this later. It's not very crucial. So in configuration, this is where it's set up S-Bus, UART1. You don't have to change anything. If you have a Spectrum radio, you can actually do auto-bind, which is cool. So this is where we're going to want to select if we're doing telemetry. So we're not doing telemetry, are we? Okay, so this is where I think I was wrong with Cedric because I wasn't sure if it could do this.
Yep, all full telemetry.
So telemetry currently on this RaceFlight version only works on TX3 or RX3. So he actually is able to solder the telemetry to RX3, which I didn't tell him to do. The reason being is right now on RaceFlight, if you solder up anything to RX3, it actually disables turtle mode. This is just with current firmwares. In the future, this is going to be changed, but just keep in mind that if you're watching this video, depending on 324 firmware, you cannot do that. So at the moment, Cedric, you're not going to get telemetry to receiver. RaceFlight failed, but I will say every other feature and everything is going to work just fine. In the future, he'll be able to unsolder that, move it, and life will be good. Okay. Now, if he doesn't want to have turtle mode or smart audio, then he could just solder his telemetry. But in this case, we're not going to do that. It's not the end of the world.
I'm just going to leave it.
Leave it, okay? This is where you can select double arm, so if you want to flip the switch, we don't want that, so we're going to turn that off.
I didn't have to do it.
You didn't have to.
No, just then.
You didn't?
It didn't double.
Oh, really?
I didn't have to do double arm.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Anyhow, okay, so we're going to save that. We're going to save that. And we're going to go to VTX device. Now, when we went through the original screens, we selected this, but it's always good to double check this. We're running smart audio. If you have the Tramp, you can do the same thing. And then we're running it on TX3, right?
No.
And so that's where...
What is that, 3 up there?
It's okay. TX3.
Okay.
So we're going to click Save. And now here's the other cool part right here, which is VTX pit mode type. So we want to have connected to battery. So Cedric, if you want to connect the battery there. Okay. Spark. Anyhow, so remove props, connect to the battery. What you can do here is... Oh, and you actually need your Unify plugged in.
Okay.
So, right there. Because it's going to try and detect the Unify right now.
That's funny. Tries to detect the Unify.
Yep, through the smart audio cable.
Oh, fuck it.
If you can plug this in. Need some help there, buddy?
I don't know.
Look at that marble. Okay, so remove the props, connect to the battery. Click next. Okay, so this is a cool thing with RaceFlight. You can actually, on the switch on your radio, you can turn your VTX. I know for sure right now you have the ability to, when you click it like this, VTX pit mode after power cycle, essentially what that does is the moment you power on the quad, the VTX goes into pit mode. So you can work on your quad, and everything.
But when you're ready to fly,
you just flip the switch and it turns on. In the future, on beta firmware as it's working right now, in the future you actually can turn it on and off.
okay.
So if you're in a team race or you're at any other race, you can literally just turn your VTX on and off. So
I see what you're doing, RaceFlight.
yeah, oh yeah. So anyhow, so VTX pit mode after power cycle. We're gonna want this because we want it on a switch,
yes.
obviously. So we're gonna click next, save variables, and it's good. This success is a good feeling because this means that the RaceFlight board detected the Unify. So if something doesn't work here, you need to double check your smart audio cable. RaceFlight has a full video about that. Okay, so that's all set up now. So down here, we're going to run multi-shot. You can run D-shot. I find it pointless. It doesn't fly any better in my opinion.
Multi-shot works for me.
It's not like Betaflight. With multi-shot on RaceFlight, you still get all the features like turtle mode, which is really cool. If you're having an issue with the quad, like vibrations, or you think you may have a bad motor, you can actually test the motors, and the firmware will tell you which motor is actually off, which is really cool.
That's cool.
So if you have a bad motor, it'll easily tell you. Reverse prop direction, LED. This changes the LED color on the board, but since it's flipped upside down, it's kind of pointless.
Yep.
We're going to go to PID tuning, so we were at configuration, PID tuning now. Okay. So these are stock PIDs. Okay. Now, on some of the newer firmwares that are coming out, like if you have a 3-inch quad, you can select those. Defaults are what we are gonna stick with.
Okay.
In future releases, these PIDs are pre-tuned. The actual PID controller is pre-tuned, so it flies pretty well on stock. But in the future, you're actually going to be able to go in